So let me today introduce today's host and session on grieving, grieving what was, what is, and discussing how we can move forward. Will be led by Coach Kyla Mitsunaga. Kyla is a hyphenated Asian based in Seoul. There's not much that Kyla hasn't done or been recognized for as a certified happiness and women's empowerment coach, certified theta healer practitioner, professor, founder of the Happiness Workshop and her own company with Warriors. Kyla has spoken at TED Soul and published 2 books, With versus At, and recently on Growing, the latter of which she will be doing a book club series through our #Universal Asian Voices series. She has won several teaching awards and delivered innovative and dynamic corporate workshops, as well as practiced one-on-one coaching all over the globe. Thus, without further ado, I will pass it on to Kyla. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tara, for the wonderful introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. You know, we planned this mental health series, with COVID in mind, not, of course, anticipating what's going on with a lot of, recent events in the US. And lots of violence against hyphenated Asians as well. But we're so glad that you're here, and we're so glad that you showed up to be here. I would love to, as Tara said, please feel free to share your thoughts, share your questions, share your stories either in the chat or with us, real time. My intention is to hold a safe container for and with everybody here. All of us are, on our own different grief journeys. And I just ask all of us to just honor where all of us are coming into this space. Just really grateful to be here and to be able to hold and share the space with all of you. So thank you so much for joining us. So the topic, good grief, came to me because when I was a child, I used to watch Charlie Brown. Does anybody know Charlie Brown or watch Charlie Brown? Okay, Lisa, I see you. Tara, maybe I'm 42, so to give the age range of this. But he always says good grief, like in this cartoon, you can see him in the upper left here. And I love a good word pun. If you know me well, you know that about me. And so it came to me that what if we could make grief good? And so that's also my intention, in addition to holding space for and with all of you today. Okie dokie. So where are we in our mental health talks? So, at the beginning of the year, Kate, me, Tara, and Song give a little wave song. She's our relationship coach. We kind of came together and we wanted to create space for and with the community, the hyphenated Asian community, to talk about mental health. And so in January, we had like an introduction. In February, some of you joined in February. Kate, who's our resident life coach, was talking about giving permission to be yourself. And I will be talking about grief and kind of following on and piggybacking on what Kate was talking about, giving ourselves permission to heal and to move forward too. In April, Song will be talking about authenticity. And in May, we'll be back, all of us together for closing and any Q&A. So that's kind of where we are. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my own grief journey. It's a little bit, there's a lot going on here. But I hopefully it will be clear. And of course, feel free to ask questions if it's not clear. So the circles represent, the pictures represent different times in my life where grief came up for me. And they are as large as the larger they are, the bigger they are in my life, I guess, and the bigger the impact. So I went to boarding school. My background is my mother is Singaporean, my father Japanese American, and I was born and raised in Hong Kong. So I love what Tara's doing, the hyphenated Asian. I was like, oh my gosh, I found a home. Because I have, I'm a TCK, third culture kid, but back then, we didn't have that term TCK. It just was like identity crisis. So when I was 14, I left Hong Kong and I went to boarding school in California for high school. And this was actually taken in Japan, this picture. But it was the first time that I felt deep sadness about leaving my home, leaving my friends, leaving everything that I knew, basically, to go into this new country, this new type of school where I would be living there. And so that's, I think as an adult, that was the first time, I think. Then later, my pawpaw, my maternal grandmother in Cantonese, she passed away. And this was in 2013. So that was the first time, like, I lost somebody who I was really close to. I grew up with her. When my mom went to work, my grandmother, Pawpaw, came from Singapore to live with us in Hong Kong. And so she was kind of like a mother to me. So that's the number 2. Number 3, and this, you can see that the circle gets bigger. In 2016, my mom was diagnosed with early onset dementia. And although she has not physically passed, I realized in hindsight that I was grieving her old self pre-dementia. This was us on a bus in Korea. Number 4, the circle gets even bigger. And that's, as Tara mentioned earlier, I wrote this book about my depression that I had after my mom was diagnosed. I'm a depression overcomer. I was depressed for 2 years after the diagnosis. But writing and sharing the story, that growth journey, was really huge for me. Giving myself a voice. And I'm a former people pleaser. So I always just would tell people what they wanted to hear and kind of silence my own true voice. So that was really huge. And then number 5, you can see, this is a bit of a blurry picture, but the woman here is my aunt, my dad's sister. So last year in 2020, she lost both her husband and her brother, 2 of my uncles, within weeks of each other. And my dad was like, can you help her with her depression? And you can see that this circle is even bigger. And while I wasn't that close to the uncles, I felt deep sadness empathetically for my aunt and what she was trying to grow through. So you can see here in the last one, and I see this as ongoing, right? I wrote here to be continued because I think the journey is, still gonna keep going. The biggest circle perhaps was even after writing my second book, I realized I found meaning in the passing of my two uncles, in losing my mother to dementia, by creating this workbook and in the work that I do. I work with clients to help them overcome depression, stress, anxiety, and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I found my meaning through my own grief journey, my own growth journey. And I didn't even realize actually that I was grieving my old mom. So in putting that workbook together for my aunt, which is now available on my website for everybody, yeah, I kind of grew a lot. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I do really want this to be an interactive process, so I'd love to hear from all of you now. Your name, where you're zooming in from, and one word that comes up for you when you hear the word grief. And there's no right or wrong. This photo was taken of me in Busan. Tara, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. So I'm Tara. I am zooming in from France. And one word. I would say grief is deep. That's deep.
Thank you, Tara. That's a great word. When you said deep, my heart was like, oh, yes, I feel that. Thank you, Tara. Song, what about you?
Sorry, I forgot I was muted. Yeah, so I'm Song, and I am zooming in from Atlanta, Georgia, here in the USA. And the word that comes up for me when I hear the word grief, give me just a second to let the feeling sink in.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, I don't know why, but the word necessary comes to mind for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or essential. So I think to the human experience. So yeah, that's what I. Yeah.
Thanks, Song. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. So I'm zooming in from Korea, specifically Seoul, and one word that comes up for me when I hear the word grief is innocence. So that maybe lost innocence. I don't know.
Thank you so much.
I'm zooming from Moss Beach, California, formerly Ohlone land. And I'm going to answer the one word in a Zen way, which is not one thing. So grief is not just one thing.
Thank you. And thank you for honoring your ancestor land.
So I'm in Japan and I'm attending a conference in the US this week. And it's really hard. It's really difficult actually to be in this space populated by Americans right now. And, there is kind of an official institutional knowledge, acknowledgement of the events that just happened. But anyway, yeah, so kind of struggling, I think, right now when I hear the word grief.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing where you are in your grief journey.
I'm zooming in from Seoul, South Korea. And the word for grief, I would say, is long term.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for being here.
I'm zooming from France, and the first word that comes up about grief for me would be emptiness.
Thank you for joining us. I know it's really late your time. Appreciate your being here.
Hi everyone, I'm zooming in from South Korea, Seoul, and grief. Still, it's not clear to me, but um, unhappiness.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. So we have a lot of really different words, and the thing about grief is that there's no one way or word or experience, right? We all, because we're so different as humans, we all grow through it differently. And sometimes I feel like there's no words, right? And I know that was the case for me when I was deep in my depression. I really wanted to say stuff or write stuff, but even at that time I couldn't. So what I did was I started drawing. And so I wanted to have this next activity be about just giving ourselves the permission to draw whatever comes up for us. So in the next few minutes, you have a journal or a blank piece of paper. Just feel free to draw whatever comes to your mind. It could be pictures, it could be words, it could be phrases. There's no right or wrong. Just let your let your imagination, oops, let your imagination guide you. And yeah. Okay, friends. Would anybody like to share their drawing with us? Well, I'll go first. Okay, so this is my drawing. Can everybody see it? There's the camera. Yeah, there's the camera. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I drew this flower because I was thinking about the season that we're in. Spring here. Hey, Kate. And I was also thinking about what Alice said, her word of grief about how it's like innocence, and kind of brought me back to when I was in middle school. Like these are one of the few things that I could draw well. So I would draw this flower, but I also think that it's symbolic of like hope and blooming and spring and renewal and new beginnings. And every day is just this new beginning of growth and things like that. So I think that's where it was going with that. Yeah. So Kate, we're just sharing. We were just drawing grief and what that was coming up for us. Would anybody else like to share their drawing?
So I take notes visually anyway, so I had started just painting while you were talking, and sorry. Ugh. I don't usually interpret my drawings, but I can say that this big yellow patch here is the color of these invasive species here that people love in California, which are the oxalis, which is this fluorescent yellow that comes out right now. So people go and they take their selfies in this field with the oxalis. But they're also weeds. So I was weeding today, and I was noticing that for me, the grief part of moving through grief is also just like being very hands-on with it, like tactile with things, and kind of that helps to bring me back to like my existence, my like presence in my body that I kind of get through moving earth and being in my body. I don't know, that's but I don't know why I was painting flowers really. But I really loved your way of telling your story in circles, and I'm gonna think about that for myself, kind of trying to see what comes up for me as I try to put things into little circles. And the last thing is I hope we get to hear more stories, because I am deeply moved by stories of people who have had to let go of things and have had to find a way to move on in our own ways, like maybe not following the model of what we were shown, how we were taught to do these things, but finding our own way and how that happens. And it's just very, very touching to me. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you for seeing me in my circles. I think it's interesting that we both, they're both flowers on both of our pages. That's a really cool, overlap. Yeah, and I love how you mentioned that there doesn't have to be an interpretation of the drawing. I love that. And I was actually going to share that. Like, if you just wanted to simply share your drawing, we would love to simply honor that and honor your drawing as well. Before that, Kate, do you want to just introduce yourself, like your name, where you're zooming in from, and one word that comes up for you when you think of grief?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate. Some of us, we've connected before. I apologize, I'm running a little late today. I am in Seoul, South Korea. I have been here about 1.5 years. Most of the time I've been living abroad has been corona'd. I am a life coach. And grief. When I think of grief, I think of a friend. In the sense, I'll make this short, but for me, I always saw that we try to block out grief and we try to avoid it. And I realized in my own life, when I started embracing it and decided to befriend it as something that can provide gifts, it really changed my life.
Thanks so much, Kate. And thank you so much for joining us on this Monday morning here in Korea. And I love that about becoming friends with grief. That's a really great image. I had this image of you and grief, like holding hands.
Exactly.
And skipping around together, like on the playground.
Yeah. I find when we have an acceptance of it versus this, like, get away from me, it's like, no, I'm not leaving you. And so at some point in my life, I surrendered to it, and I was like, all right, we're gonna be friends.
That's great, Kate. Thank you so much for sharing. Would anybody else like to share their drawing?
I can share.
Sure.
Yeah. So actually, I didn't draw anything because I actually had a picture that immediately came to mind, and I will share it with you guys if you want. Okay. So whenever I think of grief, I think of water. And when you mentioned that, this is actually a picture of me in front of a lake here in Georgia called Lake Lanier. And the reason why I thought of this picture was because whenever I think of grief, it reminds me, I mean, it's obviously a loss and it brings up a lot of emotions. And, usually those emotions have to do with sadness, and a lot of pain and stuff like that. But to me, emotions, if I could represent emotions with any kind of element, it would be with water. And when you think of grief, you think of tears, but also at the same time, you think of it's almost like you cleanse yourself with water as well. You know, you're able to kind of purify. It's a very purifying thing. Water is very purifying, and it kind of makes us anew, if you will. And so, yeah, I just thought about this image because to me that the pain that comes with grief is very much it's watery, it's emotional, but at the same time it can be very cathartic, once you allow yourself to surrender to that loss. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Song. I thought that was like actually a stock photo. And you're like, that's me. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, I didn't take it, so I can't take credit for it.
It's a beautiful representation of you and your journey, and there's so many layers, right? And I see the common word that both you and Kate brought up, which is surrender. I also heard and honor in your journey, and I love water. There's so much that we can learn from water in the way that it also handles things that come up. There's a flow, there's an energy, no matter what, right? And there's so many lessons. We could probably have a whole nother webinar on water.
You're absolutely right. And it's just, and a really cool thing too is like, when we just even think about our compositions, we're water, we're pretty much water too. And someone actually once told me, like, if you want to, if you're feeling really bad and you just feel like you need to like recalibrate, just go stand by a body of water. Like that vibration of water is very cleansing, and it's like it's at the perfect frequency to just like, reset you, if you will. So I think it's fascinating because we are water, and it's very much, it's very close to us, so yeah.
Thanks, Song. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for the reminder that we are water. And yeah, it's such a great reset, and a grounding,
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful grounding as well. Thank you, Song. Would anybody else like to share their drawing or any thoughts or anything else that's coming up for them? There's going to be other opportunities to share. So please feel free to share. And if there's any questions, of course, in the chat and thoughts. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. The PowerPoint? Okay, great. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot to put this slide, but everybody shared, so thank you so much. This is a picture of me when I was 6. I think I was 5 or 6. And I just thought about, when sharing, stepping into sharing with curiosity and openness and non-judginess, like a child, and this I heard from somebody I was in another training, and the trainer said, hey, to those of you who haven't shared yet, now I was one of those, like 50 people who hadn't shared yet. Your stories will inspire, and I use this word growth spire to mean like inspiration and growth together, like if they had a baby, will inspire others to share their stories. So thank you for those of you who growth inspired us. And then I just wrote down here Vegas rules. Basically like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and similar, what happens in this room stays in this room. So thank you for honoring that. Okay, my friends, we're gonna go into the meditation portion now, if that's okay. And so I just invite you to just find a, comfortable position for yourself. If you prefer to turn your video off, that's okay too. If you want to leave it on, that's okay. And we're just gonna do a little meditation. And then following the meditation, just to kind of give a little bit of a aerial view of what will happen. Following the meditation, we'll just invite us all to journal our thoughts and anything that came up from the meditation for about 5 minutes. And then if you feel it resonates to share what came up with you, we will come back on video and we will share with each other. Great. So we may not have time for the journaling, but would anybody like to share anything that came up for them, or any thoughts, feelings? That's okay too. If we just write this out. I'm just going to share my screen. And I encourage you all, if you have time after this, to just journal anything that came up for you during the meditation. And, I just wanted to share that when we share, we're seen, heard, supported, and loved, which is very much part of the grief journey. And just in closing, if you just close your eyes, and then if you just think about what's the one word that comes up for you now when you think of grief, and then feel free to write it in the chat box as we close out here. And just some thoughts that I had while putting this together. Please continue your journey of growing. And I know that it's not easy, but that's why we're here, to be better than we were yesterday. And as I shared about my drawing, this is just the beginning. Consider each day a new beginning to learn, like a child would. And I love what Tara is doing, with the Universal Asian. Sometimes in the grief journey or the growth journey, we need community. And I think now more than ever, it's a time for us. If there is ever a time for us to come together. So please, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to support you. And if you have any questions, I know we're a little bit over, feel free to ask them.
So I was just, I just want to comment on my journey with sitting with, which is the invitation of your meditation, which is to invite this thing, grief, to come, first of all, to to imagine it and then to invite it into our space and to actually sit with it is, to me, really advanced. I mean, I think that it's especially, and I loved it. So sorry to take all this, but I know there's a lot of stories in this room of complicated grief that's about generations of loss that's not even nameable, historic collective loss, traumatic loss, that I guess you know, and I started in meditation like this, like guided imagery, like yay, how nice. And then I realized it was easy to pretend to have this nice experience in the breathing, but actually not touch the thing that actually we are avoiding the most, which is this intense pain that generations have actually developed, really highly developed defenses not to experience. And so to even invite sitting for some people is really hard. I mean, I observe this in family members, but it's like even that invitation is very challenging for people. And I've been asking, why? And so I guess I just wanted to say that being able to sit with this thing we're calling grief, which has so many more layers than we were even able to touch on today, that feels huge and feels actually very, because we don't even know what it is. It's like, why would I invite that into my house? Like, I'm protecting myself against feeling that actually. My whole life has been about not feeling it. And so I guess I just wanted to say that in case anyone had that experience where it was like very challenging to extend that warmth towards something that might right now feel very menacing.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for honoring that, and that all of us, we're all in different parts of our grief journey. And I love what you said about, just sitting with. I am a with versus at girl, so I love the usage of with. That's near and dear to my heart. I absolutely agree. Like, for some of us and for some people, fear and grief and all these things that we're also not really brought up to talk about or sit with. Sometimes just the action of sitting there with the grief and just seeing, and as Kate would say, giving permission to see what shows up. And if there's anything that shows up, or I think is really like, the one step forward, right? Like putting that 1 foot forward. And you're absolutely right. There are layers of grief in terms of ancestor grief and other grief that we may not be able to even name. So yeah, this is, as I say, beginning, right? Like, be the beginner, right? With the openness of, we're always learning, and I think that's why I wanted to contextualize like being a child, right? Because a child is just really open to learning and growing. So thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else want to share anything?
I have a question if there's time. Okay. Yes, sorry, I'm a little tired. If this question is too big, I guess we don't have to talk about it in this session, but the current, situation or the events in Atlanta kind of brought a lot of underlying issues to the front, right? Which ironically, in a tragic way, is good for our community because there's a lot going underneath the surface. And as someone who used to work in like psychiatric research and who try to volunteer with like Asian American organizations, the stigma level in our communities is just arguably higher and just culturally different. And I'm just wondering if other people are thinking about what's coming post-COVID. So like Asian countries, like I think economists or political scientists, they refer to like the 4 Asian tigers or something, like, the rapid developers. So like as nations, we're known as just, trudging forward and modernizing and developing. And I wonder if people are going to continue that path, because a lot of people are eager to get their businesses started up again, or if there's going to be a cultural shift with like learning how to deal with grief. And I just want to include 2 clips I'm going to put in the chat box. So the first one is from CNN. There's an Asian American anchor, and after Biden's speech, she is processing her emotions. But the interesting thing is, when I saw that, as Asians, we are kind of, like you said, taught not to show our grief, like because it's weakness. When I saw this Asian American anchor talk about it, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like strength. I don't know why it felt like that. So I'm hoping like it will have ripple effects. And then the other article I just want to share with you guys, this actually more rooted in China. This article discusses how in China, where mental health issues are also, not discussed, people can't avoid it anymore. So I'm just thinking about these things about, are people going to start talking about mental health, and then like, how do we talk to them about it? Because it's been suppressed for so long. Yeah, I know that was a lot, but that's my question.
So your question is, just to make sure that I'm hearing it correctly, how can we talk about mental health in the hyphenated Asian communities, and moving forward, what's that going to look like?
Yeah, because I'm not a professional. So, I mean, there are people in this session who have like more experience with like direct patient contact, but I don't know, like, I feel like something is about to change. Something is going to change, both in terms of racial demographics in America and also the discussion on mental health. And it has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I mean,
we can talk about this next session too. It's just something I want to throw out there if you guys want to think about it before the next section.
Yeah, I think, so I'm in some groups of hyphenated Asian wellness and mental health practitioners. And it's already shifting, ing. So most of the practitioners, although there's still a dearth of hyphenated Asian mental health practitioners in the US, this is very like US focused. But even though there's like a lot of still a dearth of, hyphenated Asian practitioners, they're all full. Like their practices, like for the first time, like they're full, and I, even my own, friend group, they're, everyone, even us, like energy healers in the non-traditional sense of our practices have grown exponentially during COVID. I see that there's small shift in Korea. Like there's the more progressive startups, like gaming. There's a gaming startup that they actually hired mental health counselors. Yeah, that's my face, Kate, too. Yeah. Where
Wow.
they actually they're on site, and then the employees can, since COVID, can go and drop in. So there, it's shifting. And as I'm sure you all may have already seen the statistics that 1 in 3 Americans are grieving because the COVID death toll is so high in the US. So I think it's definitely more challenging for certain communities. And I wouldn't just say the hyphenated Asian communities, because I know like the Middle East, like, there's a lot of communities where you can't talk about mental health either. And there's a stigma, and just globally, it's not just, I know, and I honor what's happening in the hyphenated Asian communities. But in my experience working with clients globally, it's, but it's global, but it's shifting in a positive way. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on this. Feel free.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do. I totally agree with you. I mean, I think the shift has been happening, and definitely, not just on a national level. I'm in the U.S., but like on a collective level, things are shifting and have been shifting, and I'm very happy to see that people are connecting more, like we are right now. I think movements have been happening and are happening and will be happening, but and I think it's really hard. And so I'm just so a little bit about me. My major is in sociology, and so whenever I think about what we go through on a micro level, on an individual level, it's impossible to negate situational, external, and sociological factors when it comes to um, because those things determine our behaviors and our decisions every day as well. And so at this point, what I really see is that it's a matter of the system, catching up. And this is where it's really taxing on us. And I think the common people, or the people, or those who are screaming for change, is that we really need the system to catch up to what our needs are, to our wants are. And I guess this is a really good time for me to squeeze in here about how my next talk is going to be about authenticity, and how individually we can begin to speak up, in our own authentic way for what we need, But anyway, yeah. So that's a couple of things there, but yeah, at this point, I just feel like the system needs to catch up. They need to catch up, and then and work together, to promote better change. But I feel positive. I think these are really great things. I mean, it is very tragic, but it's not new. You know, um, hate, race crime, race crimes, oppression of women, violence against women. This is nothing new. This is, and it's been, as in Asian culture, we know it is also unfortunate too that, oppression of women is very much a thing. And so these are not new things, but they're definitely coming to the light. And, yeah, we just need to continue on doing what we're doing. At this point, for me, it's a matter of resilience. So
Okay.
I just want to put my 2 cents in there. So I can go on all day about this, you know.
Yeah,
And
I
it's a
mean,
very complex issue. Yeah.
I'm sorry. My questions tend to be overwhelming. I'm sorry, but
No,
like,
don't be sorry. That's wonderful. I
no, I
love
mean,
I
actually,
love when you talk.
actually you brought up one thing that I didn't ask in my question with like race, because in the media they're talking about whether these people were sex workers, and that just opened a can of worms regarding historical relations between the West and East Asia. It's really uncomfortable, and that also has to be taken very seriously, because
Yes.
fetishization, like I think even with obviously in our communities we don't talk about it as upfront as, let's say, in America, and now we have to present this issue to America. So yeah, I'm sorry if this is very America centric, but it hit a lot of things, and I was like, wow, this is huge. So I just wanted some advice about, because I'm still processing it, and I know it's going to come up in conversations. So yeah,
I think you're doing great just by, yeah, I think, Mark, you're asking all the right questions, you're attending all the right, places to educate yourself. But I think it's that kind of willingness and eagerness to understand more, and especially as a man, as an Asian man too, that's a big deal. You're making a great impact just by doing that. So good for you. I think you're on the right path.
Thanks.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. It's really great to Mark, especially, you ask these really important topics, especially we're both in Korea, and there's this we talked about this in the last session. Like, I'm like, Asians in America are like speaking out about racism, and then I'm over here in Korea getting more racism from Koreans than I've ever had in my life. And it's like so ironic, and it's a little bit difficult. And then, you showing up and asking questions and being curious, that's what I believe we all need to be doing. And we don't all have the answers. We don't know what's going to happen. And it's just good to talk about it. So I think it's so great that you come here and you're curious and you share things, and it's very appreciated. And it's really a demonstration of you. Like I said in the last session, like, we have to be willing to do things a different way than our parents and our ancestors, like Uber and Amazon. They were willing to do something different, and you are, and that's what we need.
Yeah, but also makes me very tired.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I
tired.
just, yeah, it's tiring. So I don't know, but okay, thank you everyone. Like, I really appreciate all the feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just so like before COVID, I was working at this small office near Gyeongbokgung. You guys know Gyeongbokgung. It's like the palace that's in the center of Seoul. And I was working as an editor, and basically my boss wrote this textbook on Korean history for like teenagers and middle school students in English, and it was full of grammatical errors. And so I was editing. I was going through all the mistakes, and actually I learned a lot about Joseon Dynasty through that textbook, and I also learned a lot about like the Japanese colonization of Korea. And so like my boss, she put a lot of thought into kind of putting a positive light on US and Korea relations. So like, because of Japan, there was a period of time when Korea was under the Japanese rule, and there was a lot of stuff happening. And then the Americans came and kind of saved us. And so she has that slant. Like the Americans did really, they were helping, against the North Korean forces, blah, blah, blah. Like she was, and so there was, she wanted that kind of angle. But then obviously, like you and I know that there was a period of time when there were a lot of things happening at the US bases, like the brothels near the US bases, like, and that was like actually being kind of condoned by the Korean government. Like the Korean government, they set up these brothels near the army bases, and they actually turned a blind eye to all the sex work that was happening, and the exploitation of women. And that was just like completely being disregarded by both the US and the Korean government. And so like I think that that's something we haven't talked about yet. Like that's not really an issue that's going to ever kind of, I don't know if it's going to come up in our lifetime, right? Like this kind of thing that was happening, because we're not even done talking about the like the sex slaves that were, you know, that haven't died off yet. Those, like, we're still debating about that, because I know that there was that thing about the Harvard professor who was talking about the Japanese women, like they did it voluntarily. Like we're still debating about that. So like, you know, it's like it's gonna probably take like at least one more generation before we can talk about the brothels near the US Army bases in Korea and how that was like not really, you know, being regulated. And so, yeah, I mean, my boss, you know, so like my boss, she really wanted to, you know, she's really all about like making those students who learn the Korean history and culture of Korean English. She wants them to be like diplomats, cultural ambassadors. So she wants them to have a positive idea of America. Like she doesn't want to talk about the brothels, right? So like, so yeah, I mean, like she was good enough to hire me even with my hair. Like so she hired me even with my haircut, and she allowed me to work in the office, and I was allowed to work on that textbook that she wrote. But then I don't think she's really ready to budge her position, like in terms of like I'm not ready to talk about the U.S. Army and what they did here in Korea. She doesn't want to. That's not something that she wants to get into, right? So yeah, just my experience, like how I kind of relate to what happened in Atlanta and the sex work, whatever. Like I don't know, like they were probably sex workers for all I know. But yeah, just how I perceive it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I live here in Atlanta, and they most likely are. It is a spa, but it, you know, with there are special services there. So
Thank
yeah.
you so much. We're just going to wrap it up. And I feel like we could totally have another webinar on sex and race relations. And I just wanted to share, I know I kind of overlooked these words because we kind of jumped into other things, but when we were just to wrap up here, talking about the one word that we associate with grief that comes up for us when we talk about grief now, I just wanted to point out that song said teacher. I love that. And said word, and he said acceptance, that's really amazing. And thank you so much, Tara, for hosting. It's like 4 almost 4 a.m. in France.
4:30, yeah.
4:30. All of you, thank you. We see you. We hear you, and you are supported. And please reach out to us if there's anything that we can do to support you further. If there's any event that you want us to host on like sex and race relations. Otherwise, as Song mentioned, she'll be up next in April, and stay tuned for that. Our mental health talk number 4. Super excited about that, talking about authenticity. And thank you so much all for holding such a safe, beautiful space for and with all of us. Tara, is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, no. Thank you everyone for joining us and continuing to join us. We're definitely looking forward to part 4 with Song. And then I would say in part 5 is kind of a free-for-all, so we can kind of revisit some of these topics that we've been touching on and have more time to focus on a little bit. And we have lots of events coming up under the Universal Asian Voices series, so please check back on the website for that. And thank you. Please be safe. I will be through Eventbrite sending you emails just to follow up and get your feedback, so you can put any suggestions for further ideas and topics or whatever you want to tell us in that area. But thank you so much for joining us. We can hang on still for a few minutes. I'm not sure if the Zoom is going to end or not. But if you want to stay, but we'll just officially end it. And if you need to jump off or whatever the case may be, then thank you for joining us.